This is going to be a list of things that I believe a person should know or at least be familiar with, have a modicum of understanding. I would know the specs of your machine first, because during a ordinary, what you might expect, a Linux installation, this stuff may not be important, but when you're installing Gentoo, it will be important. For instance, is your machine a legacy? Need spell check. Legacy or UEFI? Whichever one it is, you need to make that plan accordingly. I got a couple cool commands that'll tell you what's happening. So run that command, it returns legacy. This one will also tell you the architecture of your machine. You'll see that it says BIOS and it's 64-bit. If you're interested to find out if your machine supports virtualization, you can run this command. You'll say, watch it open up over there. All right, I didn't get any return, and that means that it does not support virtualization. You'll need to know your disk size, as well as is it a SSD or a HDD. If it's a SSD and you're booting or installing in BIOS mode, legacy, then that's going to require a different setup. So you need to know if you've got a hard drive or a SSD. One way you can do that, first of all, this will show the size. And you can see it's SDA. That's really what you want to know, is what it's labeled as, SDA or NVMe or whatever. So you'll know the number. Now, whether it's a spinning hard drive or a SSD, this is a command for that. This is going to return a 1, which means it's a hard drive. If it returned a 0, it would have been a SSD. Not getting any warnings from my OBS studio. Once you know that, then you're ready to go find out a critical part of your system, the GPU, whether it's on board or integrated. You'll need to know. So either one of these commands will get you the exact same information in my case. Now, if you've got an NVIDIA card or something different, it might show something different readout. I'll run both of them and we'll compare them. Let me stretch it out here. All right. VGA compatible controller. It's all that both readouts are exactly the same. But for me, the important part was Radeon. In my make.conf file, which I'll get to in a minute here, you'll need to know whatever video card you're using. Like you've added it or it's integrated. Doesn't matter. You need to know what it is, if that's the card you're going to use. All right, your CPU information, we just saw that it was 64-bit. That's not really quite such as important, because you're going to install CPU ID flags, I believe it's called, and that'll ID your processor. But what you will need to know in your make.conf file is your MAKEOPTS setting. If you'll run an nproc, nproc, that'll tell you what it will use by default. From what I understand, you don't have to have a MAKEOPTS entry there. You can just leave it as default, and whatever nproc returns, that's what it's going to use. This computer here is a 2-core processor, and that's what it shows. All right, you're going to MAKEOPTS accordingly. RAM, it's kind of important because you want to know, do you want to swap? Gentoo recommends you get a swap space. If you don't know what your RAM is, in this case, it's only 3.8 gig, 4 gigs of RAM, and I gave it 8 gigabytes to swap. And I'm going to probably use ZRAM to boost that up as well. So those are some things that you're going to really want to know. And it's important, like the MAKEOPTS. That's going to be very important. Now, I recommend downloading and installing your system or Gentoo system from their live ISO. When you do that and you boot into it, it'll be a KDE Plasma desktop, and the handbook will be a shortcut on the desktop that you can just double click it or single click it, either way. Depends on how you set up Plasma. But either way, all you do is open it up and there's your handbook. Before I started my installation, I would read through it. I would at least scroll through every single page until I got to the end finalizing. At that point, I would go all the way back to the beginning, and that's where I would start my networking if I had to, and then the partitioning and file systems, etc. Another thing, use flags. First time I heard use flags, I was like, I don't really understand. But I ran across a good article in Gentoo, the Gentoo wiki, that defined it perfectly. So a global use flag is stored on your computer in the make.conf file, and every software that you install can access that use flag. In this case, I installed lscpu and I wanted GTK, and so that's in my global use flag in the make.conf. However, not all software will have its requirements met just through your global flags. Some global flags need to be there for most software, but each software is going to require its own local flag, and that's where the use flag comes in handy for that. An example of that is when I installed, local flags are used only by one software. LibreOffice may not need all of your global flags, but it will require its own local use flags. As an example of that, every time I've installed XFCE on Gentoo, I get it won't install, and I get a warning or information window that says that I can try one of two methods to try to correct it. And one of those methods is using minimal. Now, it'll say use plus minimal. You don't use the plus, you just use minimal. So in this case, I was running as root, and during installation, and I typed in this exact line, use equals, in quotation, double quotes, minimal, and then my command, and it downloaded, installed, and merged everything. So you don't have to have, if I put this in my global, up here in my global in my make.conf file, that means everything that I install can use it. Well, I don't necessarily want everything I install using the same program exactly that I'm using for XFCE or whatever the software is. That sort of makes it easier. And it'll tell you right in the terminal. When you get your readout, it'll tell you to use certain flags. And in this case, it was minimal. So when it comes time to download your Stage 3 tarball, the handbook is a little intricate. And, I found it very easy. Lynx is a terminal-based web browser that allows you to browse the web in your terminal. And it's installed on the live ISO, so it will be there. Once you get through now in XFCE, it's no longer available and you'll have to download it or install it. So I just type in Lynx. It's already installed. And originally, the very first time you open this up, it's going to give you a screen that says basically how to use it. And to get to a website, you press G and then you enter it. And in this case, it was gentoo.org. Open it up. Go down to downloads right here. Press enter. And once it opens up, scroll down. You can get a minimal installation CD here. You can see it's on version 10.15, and so is the live GUI. You can actually download that live GUI through Lynx. And here's your Stage 3 archives. And this was the first one that I experimented with on the first couple Gentoo installs. But I found out that I can just bypass most of that and select the desktop profile, no system, the OpenRC. And once you make your selection, hit enter, and it'll ask you to save it, and you save it, and then hit Q to quit. And then it'll be on your system, and you can continue on with your installation. So I didn't have to change consoles or anything. Linux is installed. You just open it up, type in or hit G. It'll tell you that when you first open it up. Type in your gentoo.org, go to your downloads, download it, and exit. That's a lot easier to me than trying to run, wget commands and figuring out what you want just by their handbook. You need to look at that. This made it a lot easier because I could get a description of what it was. I recommend also that you do not run your first world update. Once you've root it over into your system, there'll be a point in the handbook there where it wants you to run a world deep update. And I would recommend do not run that until you get your make.conf file created. So let's see, that would be in Etsy, etc. In Portage, make.conf. We'll open that up. And this is the way I set mine up at the very beginning before I run after I root it into my system. Then this is where I put all this stuff in here. Also, during the installation, I was able to go to each one of these websites at the wiki and find out what they was, MAKEOPTS and features, what those things do. And this doesn't reflect that yet, but it will. Part of it is the system that I'm on. So in the very beginning, if you boot into the live GUI, Kate will be installed in the system. So open up Kate and start making notes. The reason why I say that is because sometimes open up, take notes of your install for later review. It will also help keeping your place, because sometimes it's a long wait between commands, and having access to more than one terminal is very handy as well. So if you boot into, say, Arch ISO, you have consoles, but kind of a pain to change around. So anyway, that's going to do it. I think that pretty much covers what I think you would do to install Gentoo, or what you need to know to install Gentoo for the first time. So we just looked into my make.conf. So I'm on this. I made mention in a post a few weeks back now that I had dug this computer, Optiplex 360, out of the closet and was going to install Gentoo on it. Let's see, when did I do that? On the 17th. Today is the 22nd, so about 5 days ago I installed it on here. And everything works. It's on a hard drive, BIOS only, gigabytes of RAM. That's that. Let's see what HTOP's going to run, even with OBS Studio running. OBS Studio is running and recording, and it's only using 622 megs. That's excellent. This machine, it has Windows on it. There's a Windows 10 hard drive that I could put right in here, and it boots right up, and it's legitimate and everything. But it is tremendously slow. So I've experimented a time or two with this computer. I put Arch Linux on it. I'm going to tell you that Gentoo boots faster. It seems to open processes faster, and it's just quicker, I think. If I had to gamble on which one was quicker, an Arch Linux installation or a Gentoo installation, as far as after you get through, then I would clearly say that Gentoo's the leader. All right, then. So I'm going to stop this. I didn't seem to have any glitches or anything, I'll find out.